Now, last week when we talked about the development of the prayer book, I suggested an analogy to you. And I suggested that you think about the prayer book as an art gallery or an art museum. That what we have in the prayer book is a collection, much as you'd find in a great art museum, of perceptions of the world. Perceptions of the world that were created by the most sensitive souls within the Jewish people. And I suggested to you that because of certain technical things like the second commandment, for example, the Jewish people never channeled their aesthetic urges into the creation of plastic arts, sculpture or painting. Instead, we put all of our aesthetic urges into literary arts, the creation of prayer. And just as if you'd walk through the Louvre, you'd see that there's a great deal of religious painting. This is the Louvre for the Jewish people. This is the greatest collection of the most sensitive perceptions, the deepest perceptions of the world created by the great sensitive genius souls of the Jewish people. And that what one does in front of a prayer is pretty much what you do in front of a piece of art. You stand in front of a piece of art and if you really look at a piece of art, you want to see how it's composed and how it was created and the technique of the artist. And then if you really spend some time, what happens is you're transported into the world of the artist. You're seeing the world through the eyes of that artist. And suddenly you can see realities that only these great creative geniuses could see. And they shared with us through the portal of that piece of art. So if you stand in front of a Van Gogh, you see sunflowers, but you see something more than sunflowers. You see his perception of the life energy of the universe. You enter into that world. And I suggested to you in a similar way to stand in front of each one of the prayers in the prayer book is to do the same thing. It's to do the same thing. And that what you're doing when you're going through the prayer book, going through a service, is as much as you'd be wandering through the hallways of a great art museum. Standing in front of each piece, and each piece is created by a different artist at a different moment, with different motivations, looking at different things, and they're given to us as a gift, as a wonderful gift of the heart, so that we can share the perceptions of the world that artist found. Now, in the same way, the analogy I think works really well in the same way. When I had a friend who was a Japanese culture major in college, and he went to Japan and they took him to an art gallery and they had him stand in front of a piece and he spent 25 minutes meditating on this one piece of art, and then he turned to his hosts and he said, "Can I see the rest of the gallery?" And they threw their hands in the air and said, "Ugh, gauche American." The master spent a lifetime in meditation creating this piece, and all you're going to give it is 25 minutes. Right? Now, there are people that daven that way, like people that get on one prayer and stay there for 25 minutes. Now, the opposite is, Nina and I went to the Louvre, we were in Paris, and we went to go see one little section of it, because otherwise you get a headache. And we're coming off, and there's a big bus full of American tourists comes up, right? And the tour guide gets on, he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the world-famous Palais du Louvre. You will find Mona Lisa on the 4th floor, Wing Victory on the 3rd floor, the toilets and souvenir shop is in the basement. Please be back on the bus in 20 minutes. And this group of yahoos from Iowa or someplace, they're jumping off the bus. "We're going to go see the Louvre," and they're like jogging through the Louvre, right? And they went to go see Mona Lisa on the 4th floor, Wing Victory on the 3rd floor. You use the can in the basement, and you get back on the bus. And they all went home and said, yeah, we saw the Louvre. There are people who daven that way. There are people who go through the pages of prayer. You can even talk to them. You can, "How are you? Who do you like in the Final Four? North Carolina. That's good. How many? You can get the whole conversation because they're just they're jogging through this. They're people that daven the way people go through the Louvre. It's the same kind of a thing. It's a question of how you understand the art that you're standing in front of. That's one way to think about the prayer book. Okay, you guys want to come in and sit down? I'm always nervous when people are standing because they'll fall asleep and hurt themselves. So Shavo, can we get some more chairs? Danny, were there more chairs outside? Yeah, we got room. Come over, sit. Danny, come sit. Say, we got room. There's another space here, and there's a space over here. Come on. Sorry? He's not here right now. I don't know where he is. Verves, I just work here. What do you want out of my life? If I were the rabbi here, things would be better. Listen, I'm building a new chapel. All I need is another $12 million. So Those of you who are looking for a seat, new, you know. Yeah. So here's the second. That's one way to think about this. Here's a second way to think about this. Doug, you have the red book. Find me Baruch Hu in the red book. When Shachrit and Baruch Hu, okay? Did you find it? Yeah, just find me the page on it. So if you're in the blue book, it's on page 107. And if you're in the red book,
30.
Page 30. Okay, good. All right. So we're on the same page. It's the same prayer. Okay? All right, first of all, how did this get put together? The first prayer books that we had as Jews were created after the destruction of the temple in 70. That generation was the generation that gave us verbal prayer as a replacement for the sacrifices of the temple. It was the following generation, the second generation after the destruction, under the leadership of Shimon ben Gamliel, that gave us the first prayer book. The first prayer book was not this long, I promise you. The first prayer book consisted of the following things. If you had this page open in the first prayer book, you would have just the top part of the page. You would have Baruch Hu, which was a call to prayer, right? So let's imagine that it's mid-morning, and we've all gathered. It's early in the morning, and we've gathered in the marketplace for our morning to set up our stalls for the morning marketplace, right? And it's time for prayer, and we'll say, Doug, lead prayer. So Doug walks out to the middle of the marketplace, kicks over an apple crate, stands up on the apple crate, and screams, Baruch Hu et Adonai Varach. Ladies and gentlemen, put away your wares and come over, and we're going to pray together. And we all say, Baruch Adonai Varach leolam vaed. Give me a minute, I'm going to unload this ugly rug on this tourist. I'll be right there. Right? Now, the next, all these pages that occur next were not there. The next thing was just the bracha. So the rabbis gave us brachot, and the purpose of brachot, as we talked about last time, these were meditation guides. The first thing they wanted us to meditate on, if you look at the brachas, Baruch atah melech haolam, Yotzer Or, the creation of light. Sunrise has just happened, and we've just watched the sunrise. And we're to become conscious of the sunrise. And what we're going to do is we're going to meditate on sunrise, and what sunrise means, and what light means, and what it means to be illuminated, and what illumination means to us, and where we have found light in our lives. And we're going to ask whoever's leading the prayer to meditate on that a little bit. So if it's Douglas is going to give us a prayer about where sunrise meant something to him, right? Where sunrise meant, or where light means something to him. So he has two beautiful daughters, right? One is in college and one is about to go to college. I had a long talk with her last night, right? And so he's going to talk to us. He's going to say, my life was very dark, and my wife and I were struggling, and suddenly we found out we were pregnant, and all of a sudden the whole world fills with light. Because when a child enters your life, it changes everything. Baruch atah Adonai Yotzer HaMeorot. That's his blessing. He gives us his blessing. Now what happens in that circumstance is twofold. Number one, we're going to find out a lot about the person who's praying, because that person's going to confess to us some of their deepest experiences. And number two, he has to trust the community of prayer, because he has to trust us to be able to reveal to us these moments that are the deepest meanings in his life. So what you'd have is simply the brachot, and then some biblical sections, that's all. Some biblical passages, which we'll get to in a moment. It's a very short prayer book. It was just some notes. Some biblical stuff that we need to recite, like the Shema, and then these brachot, which are meditation guides. These meditation guides. So let's try this for a moment. We can actually do this. Everybody sit up straight, take a deep breath, and I want you to think in your life of light, of sunlight, of sunrise, of new light, new illumination. A light can mean anything you want it to mean. New light that came into your life. And a new music that comes into your life. Huh? Right? New light that comes into your life, okay? And think about when new light came into your life and how it was that in that new light, life changed, life pivoted, changed. Suddenly you saw yourself in a different dimension. Okay, everybody got that? Anybody courageous enough to share? Want to share one with me, please? Anyone want? I bothered Doug, right? Would you like to share one? Please. So tell me the story. How did it happen? Come on, fess up. The normal way. I wish I knew what the normal way was. So you have a child? You have but your child is your daughter or son? Your son. So your son and his wife? Good. They're married. That's good. That's already different. That's already not normal anymore. And they're waiting and waiting and waiting. And then one day, did you get a phone call? Were you standing there? What happened? You were there in the hospital. In the room in the hospital? Oh, all right. Yeah. Her mother was inside. You're in the waiting room with all these nervous grandmas, right? And the nurse comes out, or your son comes out, and tells you, Mazel Tov, what? Yeah. And then when did you get to go see the baby? Oh, yeah. Did you get to hold the baby?
I wasn't brave enough.
No. So, what did it feel like? Was it different than having a kid? Why is it different than having a child? Yeah. So you're in much better shape, right? Okay, so let's pray. So this is how it sounds, right? So I'm waiting in the waiting room with all these nervous grandmas and grandpas and friends, and suddenly my son comes out in his scrubs with a big smile on his face. I've never seen him have such a smile. And he says, Mama, we have a baby granddaughter, 6 pounds, 10 ounces, with the highest APGAR score. And she's already accepted to Stanford, right? And suddenly your whole life changes because you were just a mom, and now you're a bubby. And your whole life changes. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer hameorot. That's beautiful. Thank you. Okay, got another one? Someone else? Yeah, Pearl?
My children wouldn't let us come to the hospital till after the babies were
Yeah. Smart kids, yeah.
But when I walked into the room where my daughter-in-law and my son
Yeah.
and saw him in his scrubs
Yeah.
holding this baby, it wasn't just
Yeah.
that emotional thrill.
Right.
But to me it felt like proof that I was here.
Right. See, that's how
I
it's
saw the generation.
right. It's like a validation that you're in the world. Right. That's a beautiful idea. Good. Someone else have another experience? Yes, please. You had a heart transplant. Tell me about that. So when they gave you the call, you had a phone call, right? And they say, you have 2 hours to get to the hospital, right? What do you feel like? Yeah. Yeah. And then they put you under, right? And when you wake up, how does it feel? Yeah? First time you get out of bed? And the thing's like working, Yeah. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer hameorot. This is what prayer was once. It was spontaneous, it was personal, but it was focused because we had these themes. You see the theme? Yotzer hameorot. And whoever was praying that morning would share their experience with us. Right? Now, how did we get all this? I'll show you how we got all this. There were a group of itinerant poets. These itinerant poets, each itinerant poet is called a chazan. Now we use the Hebrew word chazan to mean a cantor. That's a person with a tenor voice and a strange disposition. But the truth is that the word chazan comes from the Hebrew word chazon, which means to see. It's actually not a speaking, it's a seeing thing. Chazon Yeshayahu is the first words in the book of Isaiah. Chazon means to see. There's a person who could see to the heart of life. It's a person who had a facility with language. And that person that no one could afford these people. Things haven't changed. And they came to the community, and the guy would say, I'll pray for you, give me 2 chickens. I'm hungry, right? So we give him 2 chickens, and he'd say, okay, who was the guy that gave me the chickens? It was Workman. Okay, Workman. Tell me your wife's name, right? And he said, Brenda. And the guy would create a prayer with Brenda. B is for the blessings that she is to you. R is for the good she renders daily. And he would create a prayer as an acrostic using his wife's name, right? Or using something, or using Aleph Bet. Or he would create this marvelous prayer, right? Now, he goes on to Adat Ariel the next day, and we're back with Doug, the next day, and Doug gets up to pray, and he has a headache and doesn't feel like actually making up the prayer again. So he says, listen, the Chazan was here last night? I wrote it down. And instead of giving you my own Yotzer, my own prayer, I'm going to read what the poet did. And that's how communities began to create poetic prayer. It was from these itinerant poets. And people would get notebooks of these things because communities would start collecting them. And there'd be notebooks of these things. And when holidays came, we used those instead of making up our personal prayers. And then comes Julius Gutenberg. And Julius Gutenberg knew a good thing. He got tight with the Jewish community. And one of his first projects was to start printing Jewish prayer books. Because he knew one thing, that if you go on Amazon, it's all Jews, So Gutenberg knew that if he created Jewish books, he'd get himself rich. He starts creating Jewish books, but Gutenberg didn't know from prayer. So what he did is he got these rabbis together and he got these notebooks of prayer from all these communities and he stuffed them all together, because if he printed our prayers and Adat Ariel's prayers and Stephen Weiss's prayers, he'd sell 3 times as many prayer books. And that's why the service is so damn long. Because what you have here is a decision made not by rabbis or poets, but by printers, to stuff as many prayers into the service as possible, because you sold more prayer books that way. Does that make sense? Yes. Right? And that's how this, so now what we end up, and once it's printed, you say, well, you got to say it. You got to say it. And every now and again you come along and they would sort of edit down the prayer book, but then more people would add stuff and it gets edited back up again. And that's where you get this stuff. That's how we end up with the prayer book that we end up with. Does that make some sense? Okay, so that's how we end up with the prayer book. So now what I want to do is go back and try to capture again what the rabbis meant for us at the very beginning of the process. Ruby. Right, because what happens is over time, different religious movements gather together and they say, this is unwieldy. This is simply unwieldy. It's too much to do, right? And because it's too much to do and it's unfocused, we want to create a prayer book which speaks to our generation. So they will edit. They'll go through and they'll edit. What they're doing is taking out large sections of traditional prayer, these prayers that are collected, and they're putting in commentaries and contemporary stuff, right? And the Reform movement has been much freer in doing this than the conservatives or the Orthodox, because that's what Reform Judaism is. It's a movement of much freer kind of, it's a movement which has a greater investment in contemporaneity, in contemporary Judaism, than in preserving stuff from the past, no matter how valuable it is. Because what you got here is the Louvre. Now, have you ever been to the Louvre? I mean, the Louvre is so crowded that, the stuff that's stuck in a corner would be the masterpiece in a gallery anywhere in the world, I mean, you have to look really hard to see some of the stuff because it's way up high or stuck out here. It's like the Vatican galleries are the same way. So what you do is you get, sort of edit it down until it becomes a little bit more, until it becomes more accessible. And that's what they're trying to do, yeah.
They are ascribed to King David.
Yeah. Psalms are ascribed to King David, and so they become sacred for the Jewish people. And Psalms are included in all of these services.
So it was before.
But the question, they're created before this, yeah. The question is, which ones do you include? You see, so they went back to the Psalms to include them. And the question is, which ones do you include and how many of them do you include? Right, okay, yes. Yeah, well, see, that's the point. So the point of this is that originally this was a very personal process of meditating on certain themes. And then we scripted it. We sort of scripted it, or music, we scored it. Instead of letting you sort of jazz riff on it, we scored the music. Right? Now, if you're playing Beethoven, it's not cool to riff on it. You play Beethoven as Beethoven wrote it, right? But there are times in music when you're permitted to improvise, and you're permitted to select, and you're permitted to edit. And that's the question. And when are you loyal to the canon? Canon means the set tradition. And when are you permitted to do it on your own? And that's a very big question here. And we create prayer experiences in which it's very hard to do it on your own because there's a lot of people doing it all together. All right, that's where I wanted to start today. That was all by way of introduction. Yeah.
Rabbi, there are a few that seem to be fundamental. They're always there.
Yeah, because the brachot are always there. Look for the bracha. Baruch. Look for the words Baruch atah Adonai. That's a signal that was one of the original things in the prayer book. So if you look on this page, if you're in the blue prayer book, it's on page 107, and if you're in the red prayer book, I need a red prayer. Someone hand me a red prayer book. No, don't take hers. Don't take hers. You got an extra one in the pew somewhere? Oh, they're over here. I don't want to take anybody's prayer book. All right. So if you look here, you can see how it was put together, right? So if you look on page 30, right, the Baruch Hu, the 2 lines of the Baruch Hu and the bracha, that was original. The stuff at the bottom of the page was added later. And you have here Hameir La'aretz, which is a meditation on light, the sunlight over in nature, right? And then you have this wonderful acrostic. Look at the acrostic at the bottom. This isn't easy to do, by the way. El Baruch Gedol Deah Hechinu Fal Sarei Chama. This is a poem. It's a poem that has a nice little rhythm to it, and it's done by the Aleph Bet. Right? I remember my Mother's Day in high school. In elementary school, we had to write. You had to write a poem for Mom. M is for the many things. This sort of thing. It's very hard to do, because what happened was these poets would come to town from time to time. They would prove their virtuosity by doing crazy things with language, by doing acrostics. By putting the name of the most prominent citizen in the prayer, by all kinds of things like this, and there was a game, I'll give you a name, can make me a poem, sort of thing. So everything on page 31, all the way to the bottom of the page, was added. You see, the bracha is what was original, Baruch atah Adonai. All the rest of this stuff were meditations that were added later. Good stuff. I mean, I'm not saying this isn't like valuable stuff, but it's all stuff that was added later to answer the question, what does this prayer mean? What does it mean to stand in the face of new light, of Or Chadash, of new light? You see? And then if you turn the page, this entire prayer, look at the last line. Look at the last line. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher bi'amo Yisrael bi'ava. Ahava, love. This is a meditation on love. So here, what I would suggest that what you do as you're praying is to try to, I think you turn statements into questions. Here's the question. The question of this prayer is, when have I ever known that I was loved? When did I ever know that I was loved? And, conversely, when did I discover my power to love? When did I discover my power to love? Now, this prayer is a poet's answer. Actually, there's 2 of them. There's actually 2 prayers here. A poet's answer to that question. But this question was, before we take up the Shema, we're going to say the Shema on the next page. But before we say the Shema on the next page, I want to meditate, because one of the ways that you know that God is real is through the power of love. So when was it that you knew you were loved? And when was it that you knew that you possessed the capacity to love? And what has the capacity of love done to you? How has it changed you? And that's what this prayer is asking. And that would have been the meditation that was here in the original prayer book of Shimon ben Gamliel. The question that it was going to ask us. And then, if you wanted to see how this goes, the next page is the Shema. This is biblical quotations. We're going to come back to this in a second. That's today's topic. Okay? And if you go to page 35, again, go to the bottom of the page, look at the bracha. You see the bracha? Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. Blessed is God who redeems Israel. Who redeems Israel. Okay? Now, the question is, when in your life have you ever been rescued? When in your life have you ever been rescued? And when did you, or conversely, again, if you want to make it active, when in your life did you ever discover that you had the power to rescue someone? That you had the power to be somebody's goel, to be somebody's redeemer. When have you ever tasted a moment of redemption? And when in your life did you ever know that you had the capacity to do that for somebody else? And what we have here is a long meditation about the greatest moment of redemption in Jewish history, which is the moment of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of Exodus from Egypt. But that's one way to think about it. There are other ways to think about that moment. What we ought to do now is somebody ought to write a meditation about the rebirth of the state of Israel. We ought to put in the words Hatikva right here. And it ought to end with the words Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. Because if you want to know the truth, for us, the rebirth of the state of Israel and its power to redeem the Jewish people worldwide is more visible to us than Yetziat Mitzrayim, or at least as visible as Yetziat Mitzrayim. So this is how the prayer book was put together, you see? All right, is that clear to everybody? That's a technical thing. Now, let's go back to the interesting spiritual questions. So go back to the Shema with me, which is on 33. Okay, everybody got that? You guys want to try to come in and find a place to sit? You know what, we could shove over and make room or get some chairs or something. I hate to see people standing. Come here, take this chair. Come here, have a chair. Please, take a chair. If you don't take a chair, I'll bring it to you. You don't bring the chair to Muhammad. Okay, ready? There you go. Now, so we analogized the prayer book to an art gallery. Now I want to do a different analogy. I want to analogize not the prayer book, not the literature, but the act of praying, particularly the act of praying collectively. I want you to think about theater for a minute. About theater. What happens in theater? We go to this theater, we go to this place, and we sit together, and the lights come down, and on a stage in front of us, a drama is played out. And what happens when that drama is well done is something remarkable. We completely forget that those are actors and we're an audience. And we become part of a scene. We become part of an intense human moment. Right? If you're watching Romeo and Juliet, if it's done well, you forget that you're sitting in a theater in Los Angeles and those are actors who are paid to play these parts, and you become part of the crowd in the town square of Verona in the 12th century, 13th century. And you're watching two young people who are passionately crazy in love with each other. And you can feel their love for each other. You feel their passion for each other. And the strange thing about Shakespeare, by the way, is that it doesn't matter that you don't understand all the words. Because Shakespeare's language is not our English. It's a very difficult English. You know, if you're reading it, you need a commentary. But when you're watching it, you don't worry. It doesn't matter anymore. It comes through anyway. You feel their passion. You enter into their world. And you feel the conflict between their passion for each other and the social structure in which they live, which is the plot of Romeo and Juliet, right? And only when the drama is over at the very end, I'll give away the ending. It's kind of sad. You know, the Yiddish theater on 2nd Avenue in New York used to do Yiddish versions of all the Shakespeare plays. And they always were verteist and verbessert, you know. They would fix them up and make them better. So what?
Translate and make it better.
Yeah, they would translate it, but they would also make it a little better. So at the end of Romeo and Juliet, they run away to America together. And they find a flat near Eldridge Street. Hamlet gets his act together. And King Lear, someone takes him home. It's right. But that's because you were living this miserable life on the Lower East Side. The last thing you wanted was two poor kids dying on a stage. So no, you go to America and make a life, for God's sakes. So, but you're watching, you become part. Now, what happens at that moment? You become part of the drama. We human beings have this capacity. It's a capacity of imagination. It's a capacity, I don't even know what the word is for it. It's a capacity to become part of the drama, right? And it's feeling and it's knowing. And at that moment, you're in it. You're just in it. So that when the lights come up at the end, it's almost like that strange feeling you have at the end of a very vivid dream. When you wake up from a very vivid dream at night and you say, oh my God, that was a dream, right? When the lights come up at the end of the drama, And he's like, whoa. It's this weird, you know what I'm talking about? This sort of strange transition back to our world. You come back to yourself at the end of the drama, and you know you've been transported to another place, right? Now that's if it's good drama, right? If it's bad drama, you keep remembering that those are actors and you're in an audience, and that's what happened. But if it's good drama, you're in it, you're there. Ritual is a form of theater. It takes us to another place. Ritual is a form of theater which takes us to another place. And what ritual does, just like theater, is it takes us to a place of intense human drama which finds something inside us. What does Romeo and Juliet find inside us? It finds inside all of us that young capacity to love. No matter how old you are, you become Romeo, you become Juliet, you become this young person who's on fire with love, right? If you're in Hamlet, no matter where you are in your life, you become this confused young man trying to figure out, what do I owe the world? What do I owe my family? Where do I go? A great piece of drama takes us from the mundane routine of our own lives into these intense moments, and they locate something inside us which is waiting there, latent for us. That's why at the end of a great drama, when the lights come up, it's not only this sense of, oh my God, where have I been? But there's almost a sense of exhaustion. It's like, oh, I've just been through the ringer, I've been through the... remember in the movie Shakespeare in Love, right? Which is a very lovely movie. There's the very end when they finish Romeo and Juliet, and the audience is just silent, which is such an interesting thing. Imagine the first performance of Romeo and Juliet, when nobody knew how it was going to end, when it was a complete surprise, and the audience just stands there silent and like depleted, because we've taken you to this intense moment of confrontation with something inside of you. Ritual is supposed to do the same thing. Ritual is supposed to do the same thing, right? And good ritual does that. It takes us to a place. So I want to suggest to you that what we have in the prayer book are two moments of incredible drama. They're going to take us to two different places. The first place is the ultimate place of Jewish faith, which means the ultimate place of Jewish resonance with God, which is Mount Sinai. And the second place was the ultimate place where Jews and God confronted one another, which was the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem. And that what you have in the Shema and the Amidah prayer are two moments of profound religious theater, which are meant to bring us to this moment. Two moments of theater, which are meant to bring us to this profound moment where we can feel what our ancestors felt. Now, here's what's interesting. Nobody stops Romeo and Juliet and says, is this real? Were there really Montagues and Capulets who hated each other? Did this really happen? If you did that in the middle of a performance of Romeo and Juliet, you would, they'd kill you. I mean, and you'd deserve to die. Because it doesn't matter. That's not the important thing, you see. The veracity of the drama is not the important thing. The important thing is to feel inside you what the play points to, you see? And in the same way here, the question isn't, did Mount Sinai really happen the way it says in the Torah? That's the equivalent of asking, did Montagues and Capulets really hate each other? Which is fine if you want to reflect on that in an English class some other time. But when you're sitting in the theater, it don't matter. This is a moment of theater, of ritual, which is meant to bring you to a moment of fidelity. What would it be like to be completely consumed in a moment of resonance with the deepest truth of the universe? That's what happened on Mount Sinai to the Jewish people. And the Jewish people comes out of Egypt, and they cross the desert, and they take 3 days to prepare, and they stand on the mountain, and according to the Torah, God comes down the mountain, and the people stand there, and they experience the presence of the divine. What does it mean to stand there in that moment? and have all of a sudden the truth of the universe become totally transparent to us. And we suddenly get it. That's the moment that is trying to be recreated in this moment. So what happens is you have these meditations starting with the Baruch Hu. The Baruch Hu is the beginning of the section of the prayer service that's going to lead us to the Shema. And if you can imagine that what you're doing is you're taking a journey now from the camp of Israel toward the holy mountain. Between the Baruch Hu and the brachot that follow, the first set of brachot have to do with light, and the second set of brachot have to do with love. And that's the journey to the holy mountain. And standing there in front of the holy mountain, at this moment, it all becomes transparent to us. The whole universe becomes transparent to us. Now, people began to ask, what does that mean? The universe becomes transparent to us. And that's why you have those brachot. That's why I ask you these questions about the birth of grandchildren. Or when did you know you were loved? Because these are moments that point to those kinds of moments. The birth of a grandchild is one of those moments in which life becomes transparent to you. Now you understand why you struggled so hard. Now you understand why you didn't kill your children, right? Right? Because they brought you grandchildren. Now you understand what it was all for. Now you understand what all of those nights and all of those days and all of that struggle was about. It was for this moment. Suddenly the universe is becoming transparent to you. And if I ask you to meditate on when did you know you were loved, or when did you know you have the capacity to love, you say the same thing. Now I understand. It's for moments like that. It's for moments like that that you struggle in life. And now you come to the Shema, which is this moment when the universe becomes transparent and the unity of all experience and the unity of all being and our place in this whole universe becomes apparent. That's what this means. So it's like walking up to the mountain and standing there at the mountain, and God comes down the mountain, and Moses whispers to you in your ear, Shema Yisrael, listen up, Jews. Adonai Eloheinu, God lives. Adonai Echad, and it's all one. And it's all one. And you just say, yes. You just say yes. That's all you got to say is like, yes, now I get it. Now, just as a footnote, the problem with ritual is not that it's theater. Some people say the problem with ritual is that it's just theater. There's no such thing as just theater. Theater is one of the greatest things that human beings can ever do. The problem is that it's bad theater. The problem is that it's like Romeo and Juliet with a person sitting next to you crinkling a cough drop box. You ever have that experience, or a kid behind you kicking your chair the whole time? Or the actors are so bad. The actors are so bad that you can't get into the drama no matter how hard you try. Like they're just so wooden, or they're so bad at saying the line. Do you know what I'm talking about? You know? There's a story that Meshulam Riklis, who was this zillionaire, once bought his wife, Pia Zadora, a roll. Do you know this story? Yes. Pia Zadora was his wife. She was this sex bomb, right? This sex star. And he bought her a role in The Diary of Anne Frank. She played in the Diary of Anne Frank, because Meshulam Riklis produced the show and paid for it on the condition that she be cast, because she wanted to be a great actress. And the story is that the drama was so bad that when the Nazis break down the door, the audience screamed, "She's in the closet!" What? Yeah, right. She was so bad, they screamed, "She's in the attic! She's in the attic!" Right? That's bad drama. But bad drama is bad drama. Good drama puts you in a place where you're just breathless. And what's amazing about good drama, like that story, for example, is that even though you know how it ends, it's still breathless. Well, you know how it's going to end because you know the end of the play. You know the end of the story. It's still breathless. Remember, Ronnie Howard made this movie, Apollo 13. We all know how it ends, but it's such a fabulous movie because you're sitting there at the end of the edge of your chair wondering, is it going to... I mean, you realize that you suspend all of your disbelief because it's such a beautifully made film. You know, because Tom Hanks is a guy that you can relate. So what great theater puts you in that moment. So this is what this great theater is supposed to do. This brings you to this moment of utter transparency. What would it mean to stand at Mount Sinai and know that you live in a world with a God of love, that the core of reality is not absurdity and darkness and coldness and death, but that the core of reality is a creator who loves and who has invited you to love. And that's the next line. The next line is that you're invited not just to stand there and behold, not just to stand there and be a spectator, but to be a participant in the drama. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. You're to be affiliated. You're to be connected. You're to join this core of love. You're to spread this love of the love of the Creator through the whole universe with all of your heart and soul and might. And this is to become the guiding feature of your life. This is what you're to talk about. This is what you're to think about. This is what you're to wear on your body. This is what you're to put in your home. This notion that at the core of reality is love and care and responsibility. This now becomes the core of reality. And we stand there together as a community and we accept these words. That's the Shema. That's the theater of the Shema. And when you finish it on the next page, you finish it, and you finish it with the words, Adonai Elohechem Emet. That's when the lights come up. That's the coming up of the lights, and it's like, whoa, were we just there together? My God, look, there's still schmutz on my shoes, right? We were just there. We were just standing together. 600,000 of us standing together. Adonai Elohechem Emet. And then you go back and the brachot say yes. And not just that, but now you have an obligation to rescue. Because that's the next bracha. Now, because the Jewish tradition always takes these moments of theater and turns them into obligation. And how are you to continue this drama through the normal course of life? Through the normal course of life. That's the dramatic dynamic how this part of the prayer book works. Douglas.
Question for
Yeah.
you. One, you're commanded to love.
Yeah, well, yeah. But that's not really true, because you can't command somebody to love.
That's what it says. And then they have a second time.
No, actually, it doesn't say that, but that's okay. But go ahead.
You shall love the Lord your God.
It doesn't say you're commanded to. It says you shall.
What is shall? That's not.
And then what does love here mean? Emmett, answer. Just don't shout. Just answer.
It's future tense. It's not saying.
You're going to.
Imperative would be like.
No, it's imperative. It's close to imperative.
You know, imperative.
Ve'ehev, it would say.
Love God.
Ve'ehev.
That's wrong. That's also wrong.
Right. Here's
Imperative means
so
love God.
let me.
You shall love God is a factual statement in the future tense.
You're right, and that's not wrong, by the way. That's grammatically he's right. Grammatically he's right. Grammatically he's correct. Here's the question, Em. What is love here? Is love? We associate love as a feeling. Romeo and Juliet. We associate love as a feeling, right? What if you associate love with something else? What if you associate love with covenantal loyalty? What if the love here is not passionate, romantic love? What if the love is the sense of is commitment, right? There are moments when you have passionate, deep emotional feelings about your kids. There are moments when you don't. But you, Douglas, have a deep, deep sense of commitment to your daughters. Every father does, I think, and I know you will. You know? And there's a sense of, I will do anything for my daughter. I will protect them. That sense of covenantal loyalty, covenantal commitment, responsibility, regardless of the emotions. I mean, in a certain way, the emotions are fickle. There are moments when I'm passionately in love with my wife, and there are moments when I'm a little bit less, right? But I still take out the garbage, right? Because I promised her, and that promise of that sense of commitment and loyalty and caring, commitment, loyalty, and caring, right, abides no matter what the feelings are. This is covenantal love.
That is less troublesome than going on
I know.
to the next paragraph.
I know. Well, no. The next paragraph is very simple. The covenant. So the next paragraph says that if you live in that covenantal love, you will live a fertile life. But the moment you stop worshiping God and you start worshiping your own ego, and you think that the purpose of this life is to make Douglas happy, and that your world shrinks from God's world to Douglas's world, and that the purpose is to satisfy your own needs and desires, that's the way of death. This is a contest between two visions of the self. One is a small self, which is just the me, And all of us are born with that. Everyone who's ever raised a 2-year-old knows that the most powerful single word in the English language, which every 2-year-old learns, is mine! And he grabs, mine! Right? No is the concomitant to mine. No means don't take it away from me. Mine, mine, mine. Because a 2-year-old has just discovered self-consciousness, and a 2-year-old discovers that they are separate from the world, and that is both terrifying and empowering at the same time. And that 2-year-old lives with the mine! I want it, I want it. Now, here's what's interesting. Some of us outgrow that.
Others of us are candidates for president.
I didn't say that. I will not endorse candidates for president. I'm sorry. There are some of us who outgrow that. And some of us make this marvelous experience, marvelous discovery as we get older in life, that if you open up the self and include others, and if you open up the self and build a circle of caring and love and commitment, which are all spiritual virtues that go beyond the self, we gain a certain kind of life. And the Torah says that life, the life beyond the small self, beyond the ego, that life of care and commitment and responsibility and generosity and gratitude is a life which is fertile. But the life of the self, me, mine, there are a lot of grown-ups walking around who look like they're grown-ups on the outside, but are 2-year-olds on the inside. That life is death. And you have to make a choice, says the Torah, decide which one you want. And the problem is that we're always being called back to that life, right? You get in front of me in line at at the bank, and it's not your turn. Or you cut me off at a 4-way stop, I suddenly become a 2-year-old again. I mean, seriously, you go ahead of me at a 4-way stop, and even though I'm controlling 3,000 pounds of Japanese steel, I will slam on the accelerator to show you, you son of a gun, that you've gotten in front of me. You took my space in line in traffic.
What are you doing?
Right? No, but it's very true. You watch how people, you become the 2-year-old again. In Israel, by the way, it's very simple. I can teach you to drive in Israel. I can teach you to drive in New York. I drove in New York. I can teach you how to do that too. It's really simple. You have to become a Zen master. It's selflessness. In Israel, it's the same thing. It's selflessness. You have to let go of the 2-year-old ego. And when someone cuts you off, you say, go. You are in a bigger hurry than me. Go. Because if you try to drive like an egotist in Israel, you will die. Right? Because they're better at it than you'll ever be, right? Right? You don't have to go to Israel, by the way. Anyone eaten at this wonderful restaurant, Tel Aviv? Yes. Right? Just learn. That's a great place to learn selflessness. That's a great place to learn selflessness. Because they're going to cut in front of you in the line. And what you say to yourself is, the piece of chicken that God intended for me is still there. You go ahead. You'll get ptomaine poison. Selfish. That's what the second paragraph of the Shema says. And the third paragraph of the Shema says, because we forget this all the time, because I'm always reverting back to my 2-year-old self, I need symbols around me. I need symbols around me all the time to remember that I am the product of somebody else's selflessness. I'm sitting right here, right? I am the product of I am not a self-created human being. I am the product of somebody else's selflessness. And therefore I walk the world with a sense of gratitude, because I wouldn't be who I am had it not been for the accumulated sacrifices of the people who came before me and suffered for that and suffered for it. And that idea that somehow it's all about me is so small a perspective, because it doesn't acknowledge the fact that I was born into the world, and I was nurtured in the world, and I was supported in the world, and I was raised in the world, and I still am, by people's selflessness. And that's my obligation to share as well. So I think this is a very powerful ethic. Now, the other way to read it, which I've taught before, so forgive me for this, the other way to read it is to turn it upside down and backwards. Right? I told you, I like statements to become questions. If you take the Shema and turn it upside down, and my father, when he taught me how to get dressed when I was 4, he used to say, if your shirt won't go on, turn it upside down and backwards. Ready? So here's the Shema upside down and backwards. So I'm page 33, if you're in the book. Ready? Ready? We'll do it this way. Turn every statement into a question. Uktavtem al mezuzot betecha uvisharecha. Write them upon the doorposts upon your gates. Your house is a text. Your home is a text. If somebody read your home, what would it say about you? So if a stranger were to walk into your house, what would your house say about you? What does it say? What is your physical domicile, your physical space, the physical space that you inhabit day to day, say about who and what you are? Read your house. There's a very famous story about a woman, maid, came to work for a family, Jewish family, and she worked for 3 months in this house. And then she discovered that they were Jewish people, and she got very angry one day and screamed, Hebreos, or Judeos, and ran out of the house. And that family came to the shul and said, can you imagine the anti-Semitism? And somebody said, somebody was in your house for 3 months and didn't know you were Jewish? You know? What does your house say about you? If somebody read your house, if they read the books on your shelves, assuming you have books. By the way, if you ever want to try this, I tell you how I remember. You ever gone house shopping? It's the only time in American culture you're allowed to walk into someone's house and look around. Complete strangers. I remember shopping for my first house when I first went house shopping. And I'm looking, and you learn a lot about people from just looking. I walked into this one house and there wasn't a book, magazine, or newspaper anywhere. Televisions in every room, that's true. But that tells you something about a family, about a community, about a person. And then other families, there's stuff everywhere. Go to the refrigerator door and tell me what that person believes in. All faith is on refrigerator door, right? Tell me who these people are. Read your house. What does your house say about you? All right, look at the next one, right? Which means the action of the arm and the vision of the eye. What do you do all day? And how do you see the world? If we were to look at the world through your eyes, what would we see? What do you see when you see people? And how do you act upon people in the world? Right? Go back another line. Ready? Ready? If we recorded you for 24 hours, recorded everything you spoke for 24 hours, what do you spend most of your time talking about? Yeah, I know. But what do you talk about? What do your words say about you? What is the kinds of things you're speaking in the world? How do you speak to people? With what tone of voice do you speak in the world? Right? And then go ahead. Vishinantam livanecha. What do you teach to your children? What have you really said to your kids about what it means to be a self in the world, to be alive in the world, right? And then go back a line, right? Keep these words in mind. What do you think about all this? What worries you? What keeps you up at night? What is it that's on your mind all the time? And then, the great philosopher Paul Tillich was a wonderful Protestant theologian who taught at Harvard, who left Germany when the Nazis began to discriminate against Jews because he felt that was morally objectionable. Tillich once wrote that every person has a God, small g. The God, he said, is what you are ultimately concerned with, the object of ultimate concern. The question isn't, do you have a God? Everybody has a God. The question is, who is your God, or what is your God? And so here the question is, what do you love with all your heart and soul and might? And the answer is, that which is written on the door, on the walls of your house, and that which you act in the world and see in the world, and that which you speak about all the time in the world, and that which is on your mind in the world, and that which you're teaching to your children in the world, that's what you worship. That's really what you worship. So what do you worship? What is of ultimate concern to you? That's a pretty interesting question when you stop and think about it. And once a week, to sit in shul for an hour and say to yourself, what is of ultimate concern to me? And then, Adonai Echad. Is there a core of, is there something? So here I think Tillich was wrong, because Tillich understands that every person has an object of ultimate concern. I think that what we have in our world postmodern world is a diffusion, and there are people who have no core of values. There's nothing at the heart of their lives which is of ultimate concern. There's just a whole lot of things that distract them at the moment. Is there something echad, a core of values that gives your life integrity? So that if, God forbid, you were to perish tomorrow, somebody says, what was that life about? They could say very simply, here's what he was committed to. Here's what was important to her. I do this a lot, you know. I spend a lot of time with families getting ready for funerals. And I always go and see a family, and I'll sit with them for some hours, and I always ask them the same question. Tell me about your mom. Tell me about your dad. And it's interesting, lives that have integrity and lives that are diffuse. Where the person says, I can tell you exactly what my father was about. Right? He was committed to his wife, his family, his business, a sense of personal integrity in the world. And then other people say, you know, all over the place. I mean, a life of diffusion. A life of diffusion. Adonai Echad. Is there a core of value that you could identify that's yours? Adonai Eloheinu. What is it? What is that? And is it big? Does it encompass the world, or is it your own narrow, small satisfaction? And then finally, Shema Yisrael, not as a statement, but as a question. Are you listening? Are you paying attention? Are you present? Are you even here in the world? Right? Are you listening? So that's a different way to read the Shema. Right? The way that I think the tradition imagined is that we're coming to Mount Sinai, and this is this moment of grand theater, and the world becomes transparent to us. But for those of us of modernity who have a lot of trouble with all of that, try reading it my way. Try to reading it backwards and as a question. And it becomes a very serious meditation about who I am and what's the meaning of my existence. And then it becomes, once again, the central prayer of the tradition. Next week, I'm going to take you to Jerusalem in the 1st century, and we're all going to visit the Holy Temple of Jerusalem. And we're going to take a tour, and because I love all of you, I'm going to take you to the back to the special tour, the behind the scenes tour, and we're going to enter into the Holy of Holies, which is the most sacred place on earth. That's the other site of the theater of prayer. Have a good Shabbos. Take care.